Venezuelan political organizations meet with members of the Electoral Authority to plan the upcoming parliamentary elections. Colombian social organizations protest against human rights violations in the country. And Air France aims to cut over 6,500 jobs over the next 2 years. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is from the south. Leaders of Venezuelan political organizations met with the new rectors of the Electoral Authority to advance towards the parliamentary elections, which will be held in December. More in this report.
Venezuela's political organizations were called by the National Electoral Council to present its proposals and participate in the discussion over the regulatory framework for the parliamentary elections of this year, following the ruling of the Supreme Court of Justice to carry out the electoral process in accordance with the Constitution.
Your participation contributes to the robustness of the electoral system, which will translate into a greater vitality of our democracy, with the possibility of settling our differences in peace. The objective is for the people to observe us, audit us, and have the confidence that we are working together to strengthen peace.
Political parties were glad to be a part of this initial process alongside the new electoral authorities.
This is a meeting between the electoral arbitrators and the political entities which participate in the process, because that helps the transparency and reliability of the process in a way that is fundamental to us, which is the wide participation of Venezuelans.
The opposition is debating on whether or not to participate. Sectors which opt for a more violent path of foreign intervention against the country, led by Juan Guaido, have said that they will abstain from the process. However, there are others who are looking to participate.
I also participated in the call to abstain from the previous process, and we must say that this doesn't leave anything for the country nor for the sectors of the opposition, because every time we abstain, those are lost spaces, and the leaders of the opposition know it. The problems of Venezuelans must be solved by Venezuelans.
Among the points discussed is the promotion of wide popular participation, ensuring the principle of representation of the different sectors of the country, both nationally and regionally.
We support any decision or mechanism that the CNE determines to promote credibility, diversity, and faithful implementation of the decision of the sovereign, the people, and with a plural election with diversity in which they will have the participation with greater and lesser force. They will have the possibility of joining the National Assembly.
The new rectors will enter into permanent session and have said that they will continue to work with all political sectors.
And staying in Venezuela during the awarding of the 2020 Simón Bolívar National Journalism Prize, President Nicolas Maduro announced that his government will take a diplomatic action following revelations regarding the use of the Spanish embassy in Caracas to plan the terrorist incursion of May 3rd with the complicity of the Spanish ambassador.
Venezuela reserves the right to take diplomatic actions against the ambassador of Spain for his participation in the armed incursion in Macoto and his complicity with the criminal acts reported in the Wall Street Journal by Mr. Leopoldo López. More information will be provided in the coming hours.
And the Venezuelan president also condemned the European Union resolution that imposes new sanctions against the country.
The European Union today issued a resolution where the supremacist European Union applies new sanctions to those Venezuelans who, as part of our state institutions, defend the Constitution, and sanctions the Board of Directors of the Opposition National Assembly because that Board of Directors has refused to follow the orders of the European Union Embassy in Caracas.
President Maduro also announced the expulsion of the European Union's envoy to Venezuela in response to the new sanctions.
Enough is enough. That's why I have decided to give the ambassador of the European Union in Caracas 72 hours to leave our country, and I demand respect from the European Union. Enough European colonialism against Venezuela. Stop the persecution against Venezuela.
Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez stressed the importance of maintaining union and cooperation among ALBA member nations in the face of unilateral actions of the United States.
Even during the pandemic, the policy of interference and interventionism, of domination of U.S. imperialism against our continent, based on the Monroe Doctrine, in the face of that, ALBA countries have strengthened our convictions, the defense of our sovereignty, of our people, and the cooperation aimed at ensuring economic and social development.
Communities of Afro-Uruguayans demonstrated against racism. Protesters took to the streets in the capital Montevideo with drums and played the traditional African-derived candombe rhythm. They denounced racism against them and the recent killing of George Floyd by police in the United States. Women and members of the LGBTQ community also joined the protest. The community held up Black Lives Matter signs and demanded justice for Black people killed in Uruguay and abroad.
There's no doubt that we of African descent have the drums ingrained as something very much of our own, but today they are a pillar of popular culture. So we found that it was the best way to give an expression to this movement.
It is a social manifestation not only in the United States, but everyone should know that in Uruguay there are also people of African descent and that there are also racial problems that are not visualized.
A hospital and some vehicles were vandalized in Mexico over false COVID-19 rumors. Residents in a community in Chiapas burned 2 police cars and other nearby vehicles and vandalized a community hospital in southeastern Mexico. According to authorities, they were angry and reacted on false rumors about the spread of the coronavirus. The community believed the virus was being spread and was disguised in fumigation operations against dengue. Mexico registered over 4,000 cases during the weekend and more than 200 people died due to COVID-19 and has now reached over 200,000 infections and more than 20,000 deaths.
Last night, about 500, 600 people, in fact, not all of them participated in this event. Many just witnessed what was going on. They stopped 2 patrols blaming them for spraying coronavirus instead of dengue repellent. In some streets where people gathered and started attacking people, beating them up.
We'll be right back, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South, more news now. In Bolivia, the Supreme Electoral Court announced the activation of the machinery of the electoral process for the September 6th election. More details in this report.
The electoral process has been retaken after more than 2 months of suspension due to the coronavirus pandemic. Its continuation, now in progress, takes into account security measures for voters and electoral authorities.
We are adopting all precautionary measures for public health, not only on election day, but also in the handling of the electoral material from when it is received in the court to when it is distributed to the departmental courts, until it arrives in the premises. We have specific measures that will be adopted for the training of jurors and also for election day.
A legislative initiative is in progress so that the state finances for candidates in the race can be put towards the health and safety measures found. International accompaniment of the process is also being guaranteed.
The European Union, the Organization of American States, and the Association of Electoral Bodies of Latin America and other organizations have shown their interest. All of these organizations have ratified their will to accompany the Bolivian electoral process to be present.
Another decision has been to guarantee voting in the 32 countries where suffrage has been enabled, all while the de facto government continues to warn against the growth of coronavirus cases in an attempt to try to influence yet another delay for the vote.
The Bolivian population ought to know that we are entering a stage of rapid rise of COVID cases, and this requires us to take measures that will help us to reduce the impact where possible.
The movement towards socialism, which remains the favorite according to voter intention surveys, has said that there are several experiences of voting during the pandemic that, apart from being a reality, is something which will be necessary to adapt to.
There will also be municipal elections in several Latin American countries. So there are going to be elections. It should not be a problem, and in addition, not only elections, but with any activity, Bolivians need to be adapting to this period of coronavirus.
8 candidates are in the race for the September elections. 7 represent the right-wing sectors, which failed their promise to put forward one single candidate to confront the movement towards socialism.
In Colombia, various social organizations took to the streets as part of so-called dignity protests against human rights violations in the country, including the systematic murders of social leaders. Campesinos, along with indigenous and Afro-descendant organizations, marched along the highways of the department of Cauca and Popayán. The demonstrators demand social equality and respect for their human rights. Students also joined a march that is heading for the city of Bogotá. According to official data, close to 100,000 people live in so-called poverty camps in Chile in the midst of a health crisis that has also brought massive layoffs. More details in this report.
The word camp is usually associated with vacations and adventures, but in Chile it means poverty. But not even the poor are called poor. They are now vulnerable. So this is a vulnerable camp, and even more so with the COVID-19 pandemic and the winter.
Violeta Parra is a takeover of land that begins on September 1st, 2018. Clearly, people in here cannot ask for a loan to buy a house, and even more at this time of pandemic. They can't even afford rent. So this was the only solution we had, to raise awareness of our necessities.
With most households without a source of income, they need solidarity and help from abroad.
We were working on building a library for kids. This was our main challenge. Then we were hit by the pandemic, and we had to act quickly to resolve our urgent needs, which was helping people. And with a lack of employment, we tried to help them overcome basic necessities, food and clothes.
There are some organizations that are helping us. They tell us that they will bring food on a given day, so we count on that. And we don't have to worry for another day now.
Singer and songwriter Violeta Parra would speak of the needs of the people, which are reflected here in the coldness and the mud. For example, this man makes fences, another man works on building his home, and this woman cook lasagna for everyone.
One of the neighbors shares her home and her kitchen. We need them, and she is kind to let us have it.
We go to the fair and we ask for things we need. Sometimes people bring us little things, and with that we survive day by day. Sometimes we ask the collaboration, some coins, so we can buy meat, chicken, and what we might need.
I came to this land takeover on September 16th with my 3 kids. Now, unfortunately, I lost one of my kids. He was run over by a car during the entrance of the takeover. He was 4 years old. I fought for them so I can have my own home, and I will continue fighting. I will fight until the last minute. We have gone through hard times. We lived in tents. We were cold. And now we're more organized, but we still have necessities, we still have needs. All of us here will keep fighting for the same thing, for a dignified home and our lives, as well as for our children's lives.
Close to half of the populations are immigrants, mainly from Colombia and Haiti.
We had many needs, and we were bad economically. So this was the option we had so that we can live in peace.
We are approximately 600 families here in 7 committees. We have a lot of foreigners living in the same conditions on the land. We saw that foreigners were living in overcrowded places, and there is still a lot of racism in Chile, and people take advantage of the foreigners.
These populations were called Callampa. They would appear from night to the morning. The social housing projects have somehow alleviated the problems, but have created another one, a social ghetto and overcrowding. Now more than 100,000 people live like that, and the number is growing with the crisis created by the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are fighting for all, Violeta Parra, so we can all have our homes soon. so we can live and have a strength to fight hard, and to be healthy.
Alejandro Kirk, Telesur, Santiago de Chile.
Sudanese protesters have returned to the streets to pressure transitional authorities demanding justice for those killed in the uprising last year that led to the military's ouster of longtime autocrat Omar al-Bashir. The Million-Man March was called by the Sudanese Professionals Association and the so-called resistant committees, which were incremental in the protests against al-Bashir and the generals who took over power for months after his removal. Security forces closed off major roads and streets leading to government and military headquarters in the capital Khartoum ahead of the protest. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok on Monday promised his transitional government would work to carry out the protesters' demands in the next 2 weeks. A huge fire west of Kuwait's Mina Abdullah refinery has been extinguished by our firefighters and there was no injuries. The fire broke out on Monday evening and destroyed more than 3,000 new cars, miscellaneous goods, dyes, and wood. Local authorities deployed firefighters of 9 fire stations to tackle the huge fire that broke out in a warehouse and engulfed estimated at 125,000 square meters. Somalian businesses have started to bear the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic. The country's airlines and other key businesses fear that it is going to be difficult for them to recover from the economic meltdown caused by the virus as cases continue to rise. The COVID-19 came as the East African country was on the verge of recovering from decades of civil wars. Somalia has almost 2,900 cases, while 90 people have died from the virus.
The airline industry was growing fast, but unfortunately, this pandemic affected the whole world, causing huge losses. As Somali Airlines, we lost about $125 million the last 3 months only.
The coronavirus inflicted losses on countries around the world, and especially Somalia. Somalia is a devastated country that is recuperating from years of war and conflict. Its economy was gradually rising from ashes. This year, the economy was expected to grow by 3.2% to 3.3%, and this projected growth was badly affected by this virus. We can say that airline industry is the hardest hit.
According to the WHO, the world will have to face a new normal way of living with the coronavirus in the coming months as the disease continues to spread.
The critical question that all countries will face in the coming months is how to live with this virus. That is the new normal. We all want this to be over. We all want to get on with our lives. But the hard reality is this is not even close to being over. Although many countries have made some progress, globally, the pandemic is actually speeding up.
More stories coming up, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. French police have found no suspicious activity in Paris's La Défense business district after concerns about a possible armed man in the area proving unfounded. Earlier in the day, the police said on Twitter that a shopping center in La Défense was being evacuated to allow for checks after someone reported seeing a man carrying a gun. The shopping center, metro station, and offices in the surrounding areas have now been reopened. Shoppers and workers will also now be able to move freely around the district again. Air France aims to present a plan to trade unions to cut just over 6,500 jobs over the next two years, on top of the 6,500 staff cuts, roughly representing just under 15% of employees, such as pilots, ground staff, and flight attendants, and an additional 1,000 layoffs would be made at Air France's HOP airline, now saddled with 10.4 billion euros in government bailout debt to cope with the pandemic. France's flagship airline, part of the Air France KLM group, must now step up restructuring to stay competitive and independent. Philippine rescuers have said that there are no signs of survivors from a fishing vessel that sunk on Sunday after colliding with a cargo ship in the waters southwest of Manila. Philippine authorities deployed an aircraft and ships in the hunt for the missing people of the fishing vessel, including 12 Filipino crew members and 2 passengers. Meanwhile, the captain of the cargo ship Vienna Wood, which is registered in Hong Kong, called for help a few hours later, and the vessel was being escorted to land by the Philippine Coast Guard. In Russia, the government has vehemently denied allegations made by the New York Times of the Kremlin's alleged relationship with Taliban groups in Afghanistan. From Moscow, our correspondent Lisandra Andres has more.
A Kremlin spokesman has called these allegations lies after the New York Times claimed there is a relationship between Russia and the Taliban groups in Afghanistan. Last week, the newspaper quoted anonymous U.S. intelligence agencies saying that the Russian military intelligence had offered rewards to Taliban-related soldiers for carrying out attacks against U.S. soldiers. But these sources did not provide any kind of evidence. Following the publication of this article, the Russian embassy in the United States announced that threats had been issued against its diplomats. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs also called the claims made in this publication false, and the White House also criticized this article, pointing out that its own intelligence services have not reported any of this to President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, President Trump also said that this publication was commissioned by certain interests and that no report had reached him or the Vice President about it. Finally, the U.S. Foreign Ministry has said that the publication of this article and the ongoing misinformation campaigns against Russia are evidence of the differences between U.S. political parties.
In the U.S., the state of California recorded a new spike in COVID-19 cases on Monday, raising the total to over 100,000 as the pandemic continues to spread unabated in the country. Los Angeles and neighboring counties have been hardly hit, despite strict restrictions imposed on bars and other gathering places. Los Angeles Director of Public Health, Barbara Ferrer, announced that the alarming numbers require the government to take immediate actions. Libya's tribes made a call on Monday for an end to the crippling blockade of the country's oil production industry. Libya's National Oil Corporation raised their voice to condemn the over $6 billion in lost revenue since January and to demand for oil benefits to have a fair distribution among all Libyans. So far, local and international efforts have allied to persuade the Libyan Tribunal Council to reopen the field, as oil has long been a key factor in the civil war.
Anyone who is far from this place hears that Libya has oil, but we, as residents of the city of Wahat area, Halu, Aujila, Jikara, Tatsirbu and Kufra. The oil is in front of us and we see with our own eyes, but we do not benefit from it. Rather, it causes us air pollution because of the smoke that is transmitted to us by the winds, and we just find ourselves forced to inhale this smell. While billions are spent there in Tripoli, it is spent between embassies and between fourth bank credits.
The president of Kosovo vowed to resign if criminal charges over his role in the 1990s war are proved true by the International Criminal Court.
I assure you I will not face justice from this office. If the accusation is confirmed, I will immediately resign as your president and face the accusations.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.